Hi, I'm Daymond Steer, a reporter with the Conway Daily Sun, and I'm here with Planning Board Chair Ben Colbath, Town Planner Ryan O'Connor, and Planning Board Member Eliza Grant, and we're here to demystify the zoning articles on the Conway ballot this year. And I guess the first one is the moratorium on large buildings like hotels, motels, and so on and so forth. And can you just briefly explain, this has been in the paper a lot, but can you just briefly explain why it's needed?
Sure, should I start?
Sure.
Go for it.
I think that it's pretty clear why it's needed just driving up and down the strip. The sort of historic nature of planning in Conway has always been a game of catch up. And this has been a really good tool for us to enact to just try to balance things a little better. I think we get a lot of complaints from people that they don't like seeing the type of development they see, and we don't either, personally. We have to allow it based off of our zoning ordinances, and we just haven't had the time to catch up, to update those. Over the last 20 years, everybody knows how busy development has been in this town. And updating the master plan was a huge step forward. We really needed to do that to get to recodifying the zoning, to try to rein it in a little bit, to try to create that balance that people would like to see. We're really starting to dig in on some of that now. We are wrapping up the master plan process, which hopefully this week, or next week rather.
Yep, next week will be the public hearing for the master plan, the first public hearing. And we've already had some conversations at Planning Board for what commercial development could look like post-moratorium. So hopefully it gets voted in for another year, so we have time to write those regulations, and then we'll be in a good spot when we are on the other side of that.
And I know we've touched on this in the paper before, but let's just recap. The red jacket, does this stop the red jacket from building or rebuilding since the fire? They have to be in their footprint.
Exactly, they could rebuild the footprint that burned down.
Can they build it in a more modern way, or does it have to look, the 60s or the?
Yeah, it will go to Planning Board review, so we'll have time to review the architectural, however that's proposed. But yeah, the footprint is the big thing.
Okay, so we can have this and a new red jacket.
And the red jacket, that's right. Yeah,
perfect.
And I think that's a good plug too. There is a section in the master plan about having more balanced development in town. So the public hearing is coming up. So I think that people should take a look at that if they feel like that's if they agree that the more balanced development, sort of plan that's in the master plan is what they want. You can let us know. If it's not what you want, you can also let us know and come to the public hearing. Because the goal of the moratorium is basically to limit the amount of development that happens right before we redo zoning to look more like what people want.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say balance, what does that mean?
Meaning trying to help incentivize more small-scale development in addition to allowing some structures that might be larger, but also trying to make sure that the development we're doing is walkable development, more village-style development, and make sure we're preserving the villages that we have now, and having the strip development be more of what people want to see. So incentivized more mixed development and small-scale development rather than big
that's residential
boxes.
and commercial.
Yeah.
So that's like a store on the bottom and an apartment above. that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
which is traditional. That is what traditional village-style development is. And actually there's decent data to show that that type of mixed development actually is better also from like a tax base standpoint, for example, than just building a giant box that has just a single commercial business in it. So I think that those are the kind of things that we need to look at and figure out what's the best thing to do for Conway going forward, and that's what we have been looking at, and that's what things like the moratorium and the new commercial development chapter of the master plan have come out of.
Great. So we'll move on to the casino definition articles. We can kind of take them as a group. And I guess, Eliza, this would be the best question for you. Like, what's the intent behind, I guess it's Article 4 through 10. I don't want to have any dead air. Looks like 10. No, sorry, 11.
All the
12.
definitions for based around charitable gaming.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think we all, are aware that the town has taken some hits over our definitions in the zoning ordinance. So definitions are not ordinances, so they're not mandating anything. So putting in definitions doesn't change what our zoning is or how it's utilized in town right now. But what definitions allow us to do is make sure that when we're talking about something, we're all talking about the same thing, and we all know what we're talking about because it's defined. And then if we want to propose ordinances down the line, then when we propose those ordinances, it's very specific how those ordinances apply. So, having all of those definitions pass or not pass is not going to change how the town is zoned or what development happens, but it is going to allow us to have a language we can use where we all know what we're talking about. And specifically, obviously charitable gaming is an issue because that is, coming to town at this point. But the other piece of that is a lot of the charitable gaming, laws, those are all state level laws. And so one thing that we found is, state level laws don't always match perfectly what's in, the town zoning ordinance, and sometimes they don't match each other in different parts of the RSAs or the state, laws. So we wanted to just make sure that we are being specific about what we're talking about when we refer to any of these types of facilities and where it might or might not be allowed or what that mechanism might be if we want to propose an ordinance in the future. And, I think there's a lot of discrepancies in the language that people use when we're talking about these types of facilities because, New Hampshire says casinos are illegal, but all these charitable gaming things are casinos. They call themselves casinos. The Lottery Commission came to the planning board to try to talk to us about these types of facilities and, what we were able to do from a zoning standpoint. And, they said, well, casinos are illegal. And so it's like, okay, so then what are we allowed to do? Are we allowed to say you can't come in and call it a casino, but they don't necessarily agree with that either. So I think we want to be specific about what the language is in the code and make sure that we all know what we're talking about when we talk about these facilities and what they are. But there are not any ordinances that are being put forth yet that use these definitions, but that's something that we can continue to work on as we navigate, what the intersection is between local zoning and state level laws about things like charitable gaming. My understanding is there's some work at the state level happening to have that be a local, charitable gaming be a local option thing where like Keno would have to go on the ballot, but that's not how it's written right now. I know there's some other towns that are very concerned about what happened to us happening to them. So I think that's just unfortunately a very complex issue that is going to have to continue to be navigated at the state and local level. But I think we're in a better position if we have definitions in our ordinance that we can point to of what our understanding is of what these operations are and what they do.
I wanted to ask you about the evolution of, your thinking over the course of the ACLU committee, because when you all started, there was kind of an investigation of what can the town do, and it seemed like, can we stop? And there's this whole, can the town stop these things from popping up or not? And what did you find? It sounded like the state makes it like they have to, they would have to be accepted here, or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, any use that's legal by the state, we have to find a place for it. We have to permit it in town. We're able to write regulations to control that, but if it's legal in the state of New Hampshire, we have to find a place for it here in town.
All right, that's a very good summary. Because the way that, like, one of the first things I learned about reporting is, like, you start your article is like, what would you tell your mother who's very busy? And, and that's kind of how I would describe things. And I don't know if we have time to go through each and every one of these articles, but do you want to just briefly recap kind of each one and what they do?
Yeah, do you want to,
Sure.
do we have
I'm
like
not
a
usually
list?
the talker during this. I'm really winging
You're
it.
doing great, Daymond. Yeah, we can touch on each one. And again, like if people have specific questions on these after this interview, more than welcome to call Town Hall or speak to any of us on any specifics. So the first one, a charitable gaming facility. So this mimics what state statute says what a charitable gaming facility is. And again, these aren't creating regulations, these are just definitions. So nothing would change within our zoning ordinance. We just have something in the ordinance to define it, to call it. The second one, a charitable organization. So certain charitable organizations can benefit from charitable gaming facilities. That defines what a charitable organization is and who might benefit from that. A sports betting facility, that's a type of charitable gaming. So that defines what that is, and that's in more detail, sportsbook retail locations and mobile sports wagering, which is an activity that might take place within a charitable gaming facility. Commercial bingo hall, this is separate, so this might be something that a church or a legion puts on, so a separate use than a charitable gaming facility, so important to distinguish the two there. A game of chance, I think we're all familiar with the games that might take place at a charitable gaming facility or a casino. Card games, poker. I don't know, I'm really bad at betting, but those are the types of things that might happen.
The Article 8 I thought was kind of confusing because I guess, and I need big grandpa print here, but a game involving it doesn't include the slot machine.
Mm-hmm. So slots aren't legal in the state of New Hampshire. Historic horse racing is, but that is a whole different topic that I don't have all of the details on, but slots are technically illegal at this point in the state of New Hampshire.
Is a reader, like, just a casual person who's not, familiar with gaming, would be like, a slot machine seems like the biggest chance game there is, but it doesn't count as towards that, but that's just because you're not legal.
Right, and again, these are really based on the state's definitions, and they don't mention slot machines because they haven't permitted them quite yet. There are things that look like slot machines, and they're based on historic horse racing. And
like slot machines.
yeah, exactly. But we don't call them that, so we don't call them that here.
Fair enough. Article 9.
Gambling?
Yep.
Yep. So this is not a state definition. This is something that we came up ourselves. We wanted to establish what gambling is compared to charitable gaming. So in the future, if casinos are legal, we have a definition to distinguish between a gambling facility and a charitable facility. And same thing with the casino below. Again, not regulated by the state at this point, not permitted by the state, but in the future, if it is, we wanted to have that definition ready to go. Commercial amusement facility, this was a big topic with the previous application.
Yep.
So we wanted to add in there that this doesn't include any facility that's conducting a game of chance. So that's the only change with that.
And it almost seems like if you want to pass Article 11, you should pass the one that defined game of chance, just so that works as a unit.
Absolutely.
Well,
yeah.
and speaking to passing or not passing them, it would be advantageous for the town to pass all the definitions, so that way when we want to enact future zoning, when we're referencing these things and we're trying to figure out, as Ryan stated, where they fit in the town or how we could allow them or where we would allow them, we need to have a definition of them. This is not anything else besides that. It's for future use, and it's to help guide future iterations of this board and the town planner.
And it really almost seems like they work as a system together, because if the Article 11 passed but the other one didn't, it would just get very confusing.
It would be really, based off of how immersed we are in it, it would be disappointing for anybody to select one and not the other. None of them trigger anything besides a common understanding of what it is. It's like everybody stepping outside and agreeing that the sky is blue.
Perfect. Let's see. 12.
Charitable fundraising event?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's to distinguish typical nonprofits that are putting on events to promote themselves or their cause. So that could be any outdoor event that promotes that nonprofit. So that might be separate than a game of chance facility.
And people might say, well, these things are going on now, but it's just that they're kind of undefined in the regs.
Yeah, well, there's like Monte Carlo nights. I think that came up a number of times. That's a very different purpose. I mean, that's solely benefiting that nonprofit. That there's no business aspect to that.
This one I've kind of felt bad about all along, number 13, because it's very important, and I haven't given it the attention that it deserves. This has to do with the Parkway. Rob, I think we have a graphic of the Parkway.
Yeah, and what Damon's referring to here is the definition of a parkway. We've also written a parkway ordinance, but this is the first step in that to define what we're looking for in this new overlay district.
And that's a great example of why you approve a definition, because if we have an ordinance that references the word parkway 50 times and it's not defined in our definitions at all, then somebody could really kind of finagle that and take us to court, and it would be problematic. So you want to have one and the other, definition and the ordinance.
In the ordinance, maybe we can just kind of lump these together, but basically what you want to do is protect an area along the north-south road from development. And,
Yep.
and I'm not very good at visualizing, to be honest. Can you just talk a little bit about like where exactly the protection area would be? How long it goes, and which side of the north-south road, both, one?
So it's, yeah, you want to, you were the chair.
Sure. So, this is an example of us trying to be proactive, which is something we prefer to be over trying to deal with things that are already happening that people are not happy about. So, we're focused on the area that is largely undeveloped right now, meaning from the newest rotary roundabout all the way to North Conway Village. So when the cross streets start to come in North Conway Village on both sides. So right now that is still overall a nice scenic drive. And obviously the rec path is on one side. And there's also land associated with the north-south road and the rec path that is still owned by the state of New Hampshire, and they're going through the process of selling off a lot of that land. And so we are trying to make sure that we are protecting that corridor. So we're protecting, that undeveloped land that's there on the parkway right now, as well as around the rec path. And that's a project that is sort of larger than just the parkway itself, but over time, there was previously a larger protected buffer around the north-south road that was reduced over time, but now we've seen a lot more development that's either happened along the north-south road or proposed along the north-south road. And so we wanted to, take a minute and say, okay, this road is actually really important. It's functionally important to town with our traffic, which was the intent of the road, but it is also an important part of just the scenic beauty of the area and being able to travel around town without just having to drive by big box stores all the time. So this is a definition and an ordinance that is actually going to protect that corridor from development, and others can speak to it as well, but we're trying to be proactive.
There's a definition and an ordinance. They're two separate things on the warrant.
Yes, they're two separate items on the warrant.
Like if you're supportive of the idea of protecting the north-south road from development, you should really pass two.
Yeah.
And if you want to build everything, then don't pass either of them. But I want to be neutral.
I think that a great example of this situation here would be the Hilton Garden Inn, which is the hotel that everybody hates, including us. But it was allowed by our ordinances, and everybody says, "Why'd you allow that? It's horrible. It's right on the road. How come you let them build that there?" It's like, well, we didn't let them build that there. They're allowed to build that there. If we didn't allow them to build that there, we'd be in court. And right now, there's a lot of land on either side of the north-south road that, as Eliza stated, is coming up from the state, from the 9A bypass, surplus land, that could be prime for that kind of development. And if we just sat on our hands, it would get bought up and something similar would get built, maybe not. Can't tell the future. But I guarantee you everybody would be very upset when they saw what that development was and how it, it was just in a prime spot and it's hulking over the views. And you have the Green Hills Preserve, you have the pond, you have the rec path, and then you have north-south road, and then you have the town. So it just seems like a natural way to ease that development from the Green Hills into town, just to say, not here, because you can't do it over there already anyway for a good chunk of it. Further south, where those lots that Eliza was speaking of, those could be an issue. But there's also, we have a lot of concerns, which we also have an ordinance for, about the watershed and about the aquifers and just the amount of development going on, and a lot of that area sits over a main part of our aquifer here. So
I'm not, a building expert or anything, but on the other side of the north-south road from the rec path, it just seems like there's a lot of slope there. It just seems like there wouldn't be a lot of room to development, but maybe it's deceiving kind of.
that's what we thought about the lot that Hilton Garden Inn's built on.
Yeah.
You know how, did you ever walk that site before that was built?
No.
They put in 23 feet of fill in the back of that, which is a lot of fill. I mean, if you, and it's not just one area, it's the whole entire parking area. So a developer will spend the time and the money to, conform the land to what they want to build it to.
So it's almost kind of misleading, just the way it looks. Like, oh, no one could develop that, but developers are clever. And
Don't challenge the developer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that have happened in town that people said, that will never happen. And then it does, and everyone's unhappy, again, including us. So I think we're not going to tempt fate on anything.
Right.
We are going to be proactive, and we are going to say, hey, this lovely nature here that is why we love this town is going to stay nature and not turn into, aquifer contaminating development that is going to make everyone very sad.
Bless you. I think people do want to not have a sad town, so that sounds good. So Article 15, that one seems pretty straightforward.
Which one's that? Because my list is just our...
The crematorium.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that creates a definition and then puts those uses in the permitted use table.
So basically, if we pass this, or I shouldn't say we, but if the town passes this, then you could have a crematorium somewhere in town.
Correct.
And would that be anywhere or in a specific?
No, so crematoriums are permitted in I-2 and highway commercial, and then funeral homes permitted in all commercial zones.
Crematorium, where is that zone roughly for people who don't know where that zone is?
Highway commercial is basically the strip.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I-2 is in
East
East
Conway.
Conway.
Road. Yep.
16, you got wetland and watershed protection overlay district.
Yeah, so that one is definitely what I was alluding to with some of the reasons why the Parkway we thought it was another benefit to passing the Parkway overlay. This is in that same line of thinking of just trying to be proactive. I mean, I feel like it's every day you hear of poor water quality being found in different towns across the country, and just the lack of planning that went into protecting that. And with the ordinances that we are putting on the warrant for this one, it's kind of the low-hanging fruit. It's the easier stuff that we could identify, that we could get to put on this year to try to help protect some of our waterways and just some of what I was talking about with the runoff and the aquifer. But also, we're going to be moving into a larger process in the coming months of really getting into protections for the waterways in town here.
Ryan, does this protect, say, along the Saco and the Swift and the Conway Lake and?
It does, yeah. Any year-round water course it would be a part of. So this is an
And when you
existing,
say water course,
like a river or a stream, anywhere that water is running all year round.
running, or can it be like in the pond?
It could, a pond too.
Wet.
That would be a wetland.
Wet all year
That
round.
would be a wetland. And so this is an existing ordinance that we're amending to be stronger. So the current buffer is 100 feet. We're increasing that to 250. The current structure setback is 75 feet. We're increasing that to 100. We're limiting impervious surface within that buffer area, and then we're adding in some more controls for stormwater.
And when we say buffer, I just want to clarify for the viewer that this means leaving vegetation.
Yeah, it could be. Or limiting impervious surface is the big thing. So no parking lots, no buildings within that area.
Could you have landscape with gravel, that kind of thing?
Vegetated buffer. That's how it's defined.
Okay. Articles 17. So I think this is kind of straightforward. Talking about kennels. What do you want to briefly talk about kennels?
Eliza,
Yeah.
our resident animal expert on the board.
So this is another one that is a definition and a change to an existing ordinance. So as we've been looking at different parts of zoning that we've wanted to change, one thing that we've been trying to do also is make sure that the important pieces of those ordinances are defined. So there already was a kennel special exception put together, but there was no definition of what a kennel was in our ordinance. And so, we did a little digging and looked, and, even if you look at like the state level, for example, or you look at a dictionary definition, there's a lot of disparity because there's a difference between, somebody who has a kennel that maybe is just boarding some dogs, as a service versus like a commercial kennel where you have somebody who's got a large like breeding operation. There's a lot of different possible things that saying kennel could refer to. And there's a lot of arguments people could make of what type of thing might not fall under or does fall under what a kennel is. So the primary reason that we wanted to look at this is to just add a section of the special exception that addresses noise, because that was the main concern that's come up with the special exception that exists, because the way special exceptions work is they go to the zoning board, and if you meet the listed criteria, you get your special exception, and there's not a ton of room for the zoning board to put other, restrictions or make other asks to protect abutters in those situations. So we're adding a portion that specifically addresses noise buffering and getting, sound studies or using a sound engineer to make sure that people are not adversely affected that are near a kennel. But there is also a definition as well in there, so that, again, when we say a kennel, we know that we're all talking about the same thing, because is 5 dogs a kennel? Is 10 dogs a kennel? What if, if the dogs are overnight or not overnight? So those are the types of things that's why you need a definition, because sometimes the gray areas that are created is because what one person thinks is a kennel is not what another person thinks a kennel is, and then if you end up with an issue, like a noise issue or anything, that is being created by that situation, again, if you don't have a definition to match your ordinance, it's hard for people to get on the same page.
I guess say more about the noise component. If I wanted to start a kennel somewhere, I have to make sure that the sound wouldn't impede on my neighbors if I'm doing it near houses. That's basically
so there's a decibel level in there
70,
that is 70. That is basically, I think we looked at like what would a car driving down your street be, or what would your lawnmower be, or your vacuum be. So like, it's not that it can't make any noise at your property line, but it has to be a low level of noise that would be a normal amount of neighbor noise. It can't be, the sound of 20 lawnmowers going at your neighbor's property line, because that would not be a normal situation that you could say to your neighbor, oh no, like I mow my lawn, I have 20 people mowing the same spot on my lawn all day, every day, like that, I think that's an unreasonable expectation to ask of a neighbor to put up with that. So we're just trying to create some more specific benchmarks for people so that, again, we're not in the gray area of like, I don't think my 4 huskies are loud, or they aren't, like, instead of having that discussion of it isn't a kennel, it is a kennel, they're not noisy, they are noisy. It's like, this is what a kennel is, and this is the decibel level you have to meet at your property line. Makes it very clear so we can all be on the same page.
I don't want to get into too far of that detail, but I recall there was a controversy about whether something is a dog run or a kennel, and I kind of forget what a dog run is. But is that also defined, or is that?
A dog run is not.
No.
Okay.
A dog run is usually like just a common term people use for anywhere they're putting a dog.
Fenced in area.
Like
for a
any
dog to
fenced
run
in area. We, like one of the hospitals that I work at, we have areas that we call dog runs that are even like inside, because they're just really big kennels for like really large dogs that need space to walk around, and not just be in like a traditional kennel. You can't really fit like, if you have like a Great Dane that, has had surgery or something, you can't really put them in like a normal kennel. So right. I think a dog run could be a lot of different things, but I think the kennel designation is more about what the operation is.
Okay.
So if your operation falls under the kennel definition, whatever you have, if you're calling it a dog run or whatever, whatever you have, wherever dogs are making noise, it can't exceed that decibel mark at your property line. That's the benchmark, which I think is a pretty clear benchmark. Like if you have like one Bichon, then like, yeah, maybe their run can go right up against the property line. But like if you have 8 Huskies, probably
Right.
not.
Yeah.
Might need to make a different plan or put some shrubberies in that make it
Right.
really quiet. Because there's ways you can mitigate noise. It's not saying you can't put a dog run on your property, but it's like you got to have a plan for how it's not going to be excessively loud at your property line.
Let's see, where are we?
And don't get 8 Huskies unless you really know what you're doing. That would be my medical advice.
Absolutely. Article 18, outdoor dining. So that's kind of self-explanatory. It came during COVID. Restaurants served customers sort of on the outskirts of their building. And this would just kind of allow, this is a definition, or is this would allow it?
This is an ordinance. So you're right. Right now, it's permitted by permit, but there's not a lot of guidance as part of that approval on what needs to happen for you to have an outdoor dining facility. So this gives specific criteria that a establishment needs to meet to have outdoor dining, and then brings it to the planning board for approval. Right now, it's approved by the rec department since it is like a temporary permit, and this creates more of a permanent location.
The selectmen were very keen on pushing this during COVID. I think they thought it worked out really well. And are you hearing a lot of interest from the businesses to keep going even?
Yeah, I think it's
post-COVID?
been very successful. But right now, it's more of a temporary approval.
Yeah.
This will allow it to be more permanent, so they don't have to come every year, and the planning board can establish criteria to make sure it fits with the existing parcel.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to remove steps for some of these businesses so that they don't, like Ryan said, have to come every year. It makes it a little bit easier to understand. You can just go on the town website, you can look it up. It's going to be very, very clearly defined instead of potentially playing that game of running back and forth to the rec department to try to figure out what they're going to allow and then go back and reprocess it, then go back and actually get the application approved. So hopefully this will remove some steps and make it a little bit a straighter path for businesses to allow this.
Article 19, I want to spend a little bit of time on this. This has to do with public art and signs, which could become just an amazingly complex.
This does not have to do with signs. This has to do with public art.
Well, public art. But when we talk about just all that's going on with settlers and Levitts, and so I'm a simple guy. I look at it in a very simple way. If I like the Levitts donuts, do I want to pass this? Or if I don't like them, do I want this to go down? Or
Well,
is it hard to apply?
I feel like this is not targeting any specific business or event, in town. I would say it was partly triggered by some of that. It's not uncommon for towns to have a mural ordinance or a public art ordinance. Several do, and it's just we felt that it would be advantageous of us to just get something down on paper to say this is what we're thinking, and this is again another example of where you can just go on and understand what what the town's thinking, what is allowed, and what you can do, or what you need the steps you need to go through to do something like that. So it's sort of its own thing.
So, just hypothetically, let's say I owned a shoe store in town, and I like whales, and I want to paint a whale on the side of my shoe store. Like,
we're gonna get into a sign debate here, aren't we, Daymond?
well, I mean, I don't sell whales, so can
Right, go for it. Paint a whale. That's fine.
I hope no one sells whales.
I don't think you're allowed to in this day and age.
I would
but
like
maybe
for
you're
them
wrong.
to be in the ocean where they belong.
We need a new definition. Yeah, but you would come to the planning board with the request to paint a mural. We would make sure it meets the criteria, that it isn't commercial in nature, that you're not trying to sell something with that public art. Then it could be considered
Not
a mural.
offensive.
Not offensive. Yeah, right. Again, we're not regulating content in any way, but it can't be offensive to the community. A mural is seen more as architecture than a sign and promoting something. So that's the planning board's job, is to make sure it fits into the nature of the community.
Are there size requirements? Like,
There are.
my
There
whale
are.
can only be so big compared to my store.
Yes.
That's right. Yes. It can only cover 25% of the front facade, and then the other sides are not regulated by percentage, but it has to fit in with the architecture of the structure and the community.
Very well said. I mean, is there anything else? I mean, it's such a complicated topic.
Yeah, but it was really meant to distinguish a sign from art, so we don't have some of the conflicts that we're going through currently. So there's a whole section of lists that says what's prohibited as part of public art to help separate those two.
And again, art is something that's not tied to something that's being sold.
Correct.
Let's see. I think Article 20 we've kind of touched on shoreline overlay and protection overlay. I guess maybe we have, maybe we haven't.
Yeah,
Is that
touched on
related
that.
to the other one?
When we were talking about the definition, so I believe I tied that in.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if we have anything else on that. It's just like Ryan stated, it was just to strengthen it.
Article 21, which is I believe my boss's article. Is that?
For shoreline?
Oh,
I don't have.
oh no, sorry,
petitioned
no,
articles.
this is accelerated dwelling unit.
Are we into the
We're in
petition
the
list?
petition
Petition
articles.
list,
Okay.
yeah. So
Removing the existing definition of dwelling unit, replaced with. So article,
yeah.
that's a long one.
yeah, so we're into the petitioned warrant articles, which means that these were from this one to the end of the zoning articles. These were all proposed by outside source from the planning board. We still do review them and we do vote on them, whether we support or not them. We can go through them one at a time. As far as our insight on them, it's going to be mostly personal. It's not
Right.
going to be
Oh, sure.
the same amount of time that we spend on some of the other ones.
You guys are like zoning wizards, so go ahead.
Well, Ryan, do you want to start
Sure.
off with this one?
What's up first?
Is
So, yeah,
this
shoreline
one?
is
No, right
first,
here.
I believe. We touched on this already.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, this is separate than what we
this
discussed
is-
before.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is Mark's, correct?
This is,
Yeah.
yeah. So this was a petition article to amend the shoreline overlay district. And it regulates docks and swim rafts. It gives the town some more control to say what the distance of a dock can be, where a swim raft can be. There were some concerns with the conflicts with state regulations and what the town actually has the authority to enforce. But we'll cross that bridge. I think overall the article just works to put further protections in to protect Conway Lake.
Protect it from what would be the harm of having a dock someplace?
It's just general overuse, I think, of the body of water. I mean, the more people and stuff, like the more kids peeing in the lake, you know.
Well, and docks not where you anticipate docks being can be very hazardous when it comes to motor vehicles on the lake. I think, again, that's another example is we can look around the state and see that every summer there's some tragic accident that happens because somebody put their dock out just a little further because they wanted to have it a little out there more. And, people get very accustomed to driving those navigating those waterways with understanding the distances, and then all of a sudden you get a new guy or a new resident who buys a place and they want to really take advantage of the lake, and they go out a little further and they put it out a little deeper, and somebody's on that, and it could be problematic to public safety if it's not really just understood this is the limit.
And there's also some language in this article to further protect the buffer zone around Conway Lake to make sure that the vegetative buffer is being maintained, not being cut down.
Great.
Yeah, allowing natural vegetation at the shoreline of any water body is really important, and that is one of the first things that people tend to go after. You know, if you have a property that's on the water and you want to enjoy the water, everybody loves to cut down everything that's there, which is understandable for a certain level of access. But denuding the shoreline is causing more damage to the water body. So,
Sure. Let's see what's Article 21.
This is
This is the ADU.
ADU one, yeah.
Put my little note in the wrong spot.
So currently, accessory dwelling units are permitted by special exception. So they meet certain criteria. The zoning board allows them to take place. This article would permit ADUs by right. So someone could establish one ADU on their property by right. So they wouldn't have to go to the zoning board. They could just get a building permit and move forward. This also allows a second ADU by special exception. So if you want to have two ADUs on your property, you go to the zoning board, It would have to be restricted for affordable, but you could go forward and have that second unit.
How tight is it to get an ADU now? Like if it's by, like this would make it much easier, but like if you went to the zoning board, would they have lots of, I
Not
mean,
typically,
there's special
yeah,
exception
there's certain
is-
criteria you have to
right.
meet, and that criteria will still exist if it's by right. It just doesn't have to go to the zoning board, so it saves the expense of going through that permitting process.
So us trying to remove a hurdle to additional units, you know, with, like Ryan said, the expense, but also the time and the effort, and just some people find it daunting, some people find it a nuisance to have to do that, and they start to look into it and they go, oh, I have to jump through all these hoops, I'm not going to do that. Hopefully this will make it a little bit more straightforward. Just it'll incentivize people to be like, oh, I can just do this, and they'll do it as long as it still meets that criteria that Ryan said, plus
Yeah.
the zoning.
And so like it's more housing. Grab my sheet
Yeah.
here.
Plus to have to go before the zoning board, those guys,
Yeah.
they're no planning board, right? Am I right, guys?
All right.
Another piece of that ADU one too that I think is probably worth pointing out is, you know, an ADU could be turning your single family home basically into a duplex, right? Like you're carving out a piece of it that would be like what people would think of as maybe like an in-law apartment. And right now, the way the code stands, you have to have the land density if you want to carve your house up like that. And so calling it an ADU and saying you can do that by right on the lot you have just makes it a little bit easier for people to have an additional unit on their lot in
And
a
they're-
few different ways.
And the ADU use is also restricted to long-term residents, correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. And so this works to solve some of the housing issues. It brings more housing into the communities. It makes it accessible for anyone to really establish more housing on their property, rather than more housing being the apartment buildings or big box places that we're seeing more of.
and this one is supported fully by the planning board. So
Yes,
zero.
and so was the last one too, just because you didn't point that out from
Okay,
Mark's article.
Right.
Your boss is going to be pissed.
Yeah, so they support the one about the docks and such. So Article 22, this one might get me in trouble, but so this is to drop number 19. Define the short-term rental. Boy, that's
So
a
this
lot.
this is the short-term rental article, right, Damon?
Yeah,
We're
that's
discussing?
I believe that's the marks.
The goal of that article was to limit new short-term rentals to village commercial, highway commercial, industrial, and resort districts. So that's something that a zoning ordinance could do. It could limit new short-term rentals to certain areas in town. In the conflict was with requiring certain standards for short-term rentals. I think we've learned through previous cases that we can't treat short-term rentals differently than a typical single-family home. So requiring that higher standard of building code was something the town was concerned with.
Yeah, I remember that hearing, and it being, there was one, you can see that it was supported 1 to 6. I believe Eric voted for it, based on the fact that there was really 2 sections to this article,
Yeah.
and part 1 of it was pretty good. Part 2 of it, we didn't feel would hold up. I think that we had some counsel on that, and we also had our doubts, just as far as conflicting with other issues we've seen or other cases that we've seen that haven't moved forward in our favor. So I think that the reason why we voted, or the reason why I voted that way, was just to spare us one more court case. I think that I did encourage Mark to come back next year and maybe cut out part of that. Eric voted on it because he thought we could, and I don't mean to speak for Eric, but I did ask him, he thought that we could enact it and then remove the parts that didn't work. That seemed a little bit more messy to me than just putting it on as the part that worked.
Yeah, I mean, it was zoning because any change to zoning has to go to the voters, which is why, you know, we're here to talk about 20-something articles. It's hard to say, oh, well, from my perspective, it's hard to say, well, we'll put it in and then we'll take out stuff that
Right.
doesn't work. It's like, no, that's like a whole year-long process of putting it back on the warrant the way we want it, and then we have something on the books that we are supposed to enforce for a year when we're maybe not
Allowed
intending
to.
to keep it all. So I would agree, like I personally agree with Ben that that feels very messy, and I think if we're putting things on the warrant to go in the zoning ordinance, it should be the best that it can be, and it should be refined beforehand, but I think that not necessarily everyone feels that way, which is fine, and we all respect that.
I'll put you two on the spot a little bit, just because I think you guys signed on the petition, but what was your thinking between, signing the petition and then, recommending against it? Like, walk me through that process.
Personally, I think it's one of those things that was worth having the conversation about, and I wanted to bring it to the table, and I wanted to get it in front of, Ryan. I'm sure he had already seen it anyway, but I wanted to just have that broader conversation across the board with all the tools that we have at our disposal, including council, just to really flush it out. And I also, I like for voters to have the option on things too. So I think signing that, it was one of those like, all right, well, let's have the conversation. Let's let everybody, they're all public meetings. You can view them all online. You can come down and you can sit and join us. And the voters can obviously access all of that and become informed. And that's partly what I think my intention was with signing that.
Yeah, I think for me, the second portion of it that I do not feel would hold up, nor do I feel that it makes enough sense to me to promote it. It did take a while for me to have the time to actually like audit that. Like it took, like when I received it as a draft, I said, okay, in principle, I think this is interesting and I have maybe questions or concerns, but I am open to this being on the warrant for the voters to decide for themselves, which is why I signed it. After, in the time that it took for me to really try to understand from a code perspective why it would not, from the information I gathered, would not hold up, there was simply not enough time to do that before, that deadline to get it submitted. So personally, I feel that in that situation, I felt the right thing to do was to say, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's put it to the voters, and I can have a more formed opinion when this is actually going to a hearing, which, like Ben said, like that's open to the public, it's recorded. So I have no problem with saying like, yeah, let's have a discussion and let's have it go to the voters. I think those of us that participate in town, politics want to see more people participate, and I like that we have the petition option so that people can say, yeah, I want to, put forth my ideas of how our ordinances could be better. I think that's great, and I want people to do that. But I think, not to go like too far down the rabbit hole, but one of the big issues that I think is an ongoing piece of all these things that are difficult about how to handle short-term rentals is that, when we talk about normally tourism, like accommodations, like a hotel or an inn, a B&B, whatever, those are commercial properties that are built as commercial properties to the commercial code, and they are handled in that way. Short-term rentals are typically residential properties built as single-family homes, which the town of Conway was not even until recently inspecting single-family homes that were pulling building permits. We're not issuing COs to single-family homes that were being built. They're not being built to the commercial code, or they're not being built to the life safety standards that a hotel has, or some of these other types of accommodations. So they are just in a different weird place in the code and how they're built and how they've been traditionally handled compared to a traditional commercial business that's going to house tourists. And so trying to reconcile that in a way that allows us to make sure that short-term rentals are safe and that we're keeping track of them, and knowing what's going on in town that is potentially disruptive to people, et cetera, that is actually a really hard thing to do, and it's hard to legislate that, and I hope it will get figured out. I hope people have some brilliant ideas.
We are
but
running
there's
out of time a
yeah,
little bit, but
sorry.
this is kind of a good segue to Article 24,
Yeah.
which is your attempt to do, I think, what you just said in a way.
You skip.
Which is?
Yeah, we have to move ahead.
You skip
No, I know.
Okay.
we're running out of time, and I think we should.
Well, that's not one of our articles.
No, I'm sorry. You're right. Okay. So we'll go back to the recreational resort district.
Yeah, that's the Warren article that was submitted by Cranmore Properties to be exempt from the sign ordinance, which you can see that we voted 151 on that. I voted against that. Just I don't believe that the current management over there would really take advantage of it. I think that they were just looking to ease some of their concerns about directional signage, trail signage, stuff like that. However, to be completely exempt from the ordinance could allow future ownership or management of that piece of property to really take advantage of that and create an eyesore that a lot of people would be very unhappy with. I do understand their concerns, and I think that Ryan and I have made note of that. And when we move into the zoning more, we'll find ways to address that in the coming year, so that maybe trail signs are exempt, or we'll find avenues to make that not a concern for them. They've never been a concern. I don't think as an enforcement officer has ever knocked on Cranmore's door and cited them for all their trail signs. But I think that as more development is happening around the base of Cranmore, they're finding that they are running out of allowed signage down there. And that might just be a sign that the size of development is coming to what should be allowed.
If we have a few minutes left. 8 minutes. Oh,
wow.
Lord. I don't know, Eliza, like you're kind of the driving force between on Article 24, the Chapter 72.
Okay, let's do this.
Do you want?
Yeah, Eliza.
Yeah. So can
So
you
Ryan and I are gonna leave.
So what's the intent behind Article 24, Chapter 72, housing
Do you want
standards?
to read it?
Oh, I don't need to read it. So I was initially, when the rental program that was put forth was created, I was not part of that, which is fine. That was put together, and a lot of as I was trying to educate myself about it, especially out of the concern that it was not originally just put to the voters off the bat, when I was educating myself about it and looking at the references that were given to me of other towns who have similar programs, and there are quite a few, all of those programs either were instituted by a vote of the town, or they were instituted in cities that have a city council that have the power to put ordinances like that forth without a town-wide vote or a city-wide vote. And so I expressed my concern that it needed to go as a vote to the people, and that it needed to be an ordinance. And for it to be an ordinance, it has to be written up and put in the town code. So, there's an RSA that the town has adopted that has housing standards in it, but a lot of what the town put forth for what they wanted to see as rental standards were above and beyond that. And that's permitted at the state level, but the chapter that permits that in the state code says it needs to be voted on by either, the town body or a city council. And we are not a city, and we don't have a council. So basically, I said, look, I'm not opposed to housing standards. I think a lot of what's been put forth is good, but I think it needs to be done the right way, and I think the people need to vote on it, and it needs to be enacted by the town as a legislative body doing what we do, as an SB2 town. So I took the time to write up that article because I do care about things being done the way they should be done, and I care about them being voted on by the people of Conway. And I have no problem with having housing standards that keep people safe and address short and long-term rentals. So, I guess I personally feel like for the most part that has succeeded, and that it's going on the warrant, and that it had more public hearings, that people gave input, and a lot more long-term rental owners engaged with the town after that process started, where that chapter was put forth that I had written. So I'm very happy about that, but I personally think there has not been great clarity from Town Hall about how this process is supposed to work. I know they're trying very hard to provide clarity and work with everyone, and they do care about all, everyone being successful and long-term rentals not being adversely impacted. I have no doubt that they care about those things and they are doing the best they can, but and I'm always happy to help. I want, the town of Conway to, and especially Town Hall, to, do our best and take care of the people in town. But I do think that sometimes things get put forth and there's not always enough clarity to everyone of how we're actually doing this and why. And, it's just a process. Everybody is working really hard. Everybody in Town Hall has more than 40 hours of work to do in a week. And, I think that we all should be clear about what we're doing and what our expectations are, but also give people a little grace and understanding that they're working really hard and they have a lot going on as well. So it is what it is.
It's not strictly a planning board article. It's not a planning board article at all,
Yeah.
but will the planning board have a role in, because it says housing standards and it seems like that's right up your alley. Will the planning board have any role in this one?
More associated with building code.
Building code, so that means it's more of a selectman thing?
Yeah, and the building officials will help review specific sites to do the inspections to make sure that the standard as outlined in that code.
And as of now, the housing standards will only be applying to houses that are for rent in some form or fashion.
They apply to all structures. The inspections would happen on those that are rented.
So does that mean like a house would have to have a fire extinguisher and egress windows?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to all of the details
Right.
in that code, but yeah, the standards set forth in that ordinance, they would be expected in any type of residential structure. The ones that would be inspected would be the rental units.
Very good. How are we doing?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. So do you guys have any closing thoughts on the town vote and what you recommend people do, or just pay attention to the recommendations?
I think that I hope that people have been following along. There's certainly been plenty of opportunity for that. I'm not super apologetic for the length of the warrant. It takes time and it takes effort, and people can't complain about the length of the warrant and then also complain about everything they see that they want
Right.
changed. It's part of the process to put it on the warrant. I think that apologizing for the democratic process is not something I'm about to do. So I really hope that people just understand that we're doing what we feel is best. We're listening to outreach from people who are seeing things that they would like to see changed or what have you. Certainly would encourage people to, before they go into the polls, to just take a look over it all. Like Ryan said, you could come in, you could talk to anybody at Town Hall, and you can get in touch with anybody on any of the boards. There's contact information for budget committee, school board, selectmen, planners. I don't mind when people reach out with questions. I mean, I go to the grocery store and I get a lot of questions. It's usually where I answer most questions. But with the length of it, I would encourage people to just get a copy of it. You can get a copy of it online. You can get a copy of it at Town Hall. Maybe make a cheat sheet for yourself. I'm familiar enough where I know I'm going to vote walking in there. But, that's my recommendation.
I mean, your warrant article, the planning board's warrant article contribute. I can't even talk today. Contributions, are just a staggering amount of work. So
it is a lot of work. Yeah, it's a lot of work. We've put a lot of work into warrant articles in the past that have not passed. That's tough to see, especially when people don't understand the intent, and maybe some misinformation gets spread if it's online or if it's just around the community. I think this is a great opportunity for us to just clarify things, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I 100% agree. Like, it is a long warrant, but just, if try to look it up, make yourself some notes and put them in your pocket, about articles. If there's, if you are reading through and want to make yourself a note about how you feel about them, it's not going to be like the most exciting thing you've ever done, but it's really important.
Right.
Perfect.
And
Thank you.
with the last few minutes, I would just encourage people to join us at our next planning board meeting, which is coming Thursday, for the draft master plan process as we're looking to roll that out and enact that. Again, it's another opportunity for people to come out and be involved and just understand what we're doing and understand the purpose and the point of it all. So,
Great. Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.